So you want to improve as an acrylic artist? Here are 5 top tips that will instantly improve your painting skills coming up. How you going there guys? Emma here from Paint and Pinot giving you some top tips for all things art and design. And today we're going to look at 5 guaranteed tips that will ensure that instantly your painting skills are going to improve. This is mainly for beginners, but even if you've been painting for a while, there's still some tricks that will help you develop those painting skills. So, top tip number 1, blending. Blending is key. Blending is probably the one skill that most people fear because it's something that they think they can't get their head around. There is a video which I'll link just below which goes into far more detail about how to blend effectively. But if you can get your head around how to blend with acrylic paint, you're going to find it a lot easier to do your paintings. Top tip number 2, making sure you understand colour. This means both colour theory and how to mix colour effectively. And again, I've got a couple of videos that I can link below which go into a lot of detail regards to this. Colour theory is one of those things that we all learn at school. Some people understand it instantly, others never get their head around it. If you are mixing paint, you're going to get much more variety of colour rather than just buying the pre-mixed pigment. Top tip number 3, composition, understanding composition. Paintings always consist of background to foreground. If you're trying to paint your detail before you do your background, you're never going to have success. So again, there's a video that I'll link down just below, which goes into more detail. But the trick here is that you always start with your background first, and the last thing you do is your fine detail. Top tip number 4, fine detail. So we were talking about trying to achieve that fine detail. A lot of people really struggle using paint to get some really lovely fine lines. 2 things in order here. One is the tool, making sure that you've got the right kind of brush. So obviously the smaller the number, the smaller the head on your brush is going to be. If you get that brush, you want to then load it up with plenty of pigment. If you imagine my hand is your brush, okay, so what you're going to do is as you put your brush onto the page, brush itself will actually spread out, and then you're just going to glide that paint down and you get some really accurate lines. Of course, if you want to do really thin, fine detail lines, then of course you need to use your brush in a certain way. And again, you're going to see that technique in detail on the video, which I'll link below. And finally, number 5, probably the most important, experimentation and practice. The old cliche, practice, practice, practice exists for a reason. You can never stop developing your art skills. I've been painting for 20 years and my style is always evolving. What I'll show you in a moment is how I used to paint when I was younger. So I was very much an obsessive compulsive in terms of detail. So I was very much a perfectionist. I couldn't do that as I got older. I didn't have enough time. So I had to change my style completely. But a lot of the time you want to look at different artists' work, particularly when you're starting out. Try different techniques, try different resources, try using a palette knife. If you're scared about using a palette knife at first, get yourself a piece of cardboard or anything that you can find that's remotely flat. You can distribute the paint in different ways. You don't have to just use paintbrushes in traditional format. The other thing I like to do is also buy really cheap acrylic paint and cheap brushes to start out with so that I'm not being too precious about my work. Maybe even some cheap sugar paper, and then just trying lots of different techniques, seeing what works for me, seeing what colors work for me, seeing what techniques work, and then obviously I try and implement that on my next painting. So here's some examples of some of my earlier paintings. Each one of these would have taken hours. I never actually kept track of how long it took, but they're quite small. They're only about 25 by 15 centimeters each, but it was just the level of detail I used to go to. So in total, I think the whole thing took me about 6 months to complete. But that was how I worked. I like to do very realistic paintings. So here's an example of a much more recent painting that I've done. This I actually called 12.5, purely because it took me 12.5 minutes to do. It was very much an experiment, so it's quite a large canvas. It's about 1.50 meters by 70 centimeters. And I restricted myself to just 3 colour schemes, which was the colour scheme of the lounge at the time. But probably to this day, one of my favourite paintings that I've done. This is actually of Monument Valley. You may recognise this. So it just goes to show, you know, this was a type of style. This was a style that I'd never tried before, much more of an impressionist style, where you're giving sort of a hint of what you can see, because it was a very misty, murky background. It was taken from a photograph that I took when I was travelling, and I wanted to try and recreate that gorgeous atmosphere. And sometimes you can't do that if you're painting too photogenically or if you're painting too accurately. All right, there you have it, guys. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. This is actually the first video to this channel. So if you're still watching, thank you for taking the time to watch this. And please, if you could like the video if you've enjoyed it, that would be much appreciated, as it really does help us in the long run. You can also subscribe and hit that notification bell just below, as there are going to be weekly top tip videos for all things art and design. All right, guys, we'll see you next time. Happy painting.